Anna Greenwald, a 28-year-old travel writer with raven black hair and striking blue eyes, had always lived her life chasing the thrill of the unknown. After completing a series of stories on the world's most secluded beaches, Anna decided it was time for something urban. She wanted to experience life in a bustling city, somewhere she could get lost in the crowd. She was not attached, neither to people nor to places. With parents no longer in the world and siblings she barely spoke to, Anna's life was her travel diary and her backpack. The open road was her home, so she did what she always did. She booked her next destination on a whim. Browsing Airbnb, Anna came across an affordable flat in the heart of a teeming European city. The apartment, from the pictures, looked stylishly decorated with vintage furnishings and boasted views of the historic city center. The landlord, named Roderick, had good reviews, although they seemed oddly sparse in detail. Anna thought nothing of it, hit the book button, and was on her way. Upon arriving, Anna was met by Roderick. He was a thin, wiry man with an unkempt beard and nervous eyes that darted around constantly. He smelled faintly of something acrid and rotten, but Anna attributed it to the old building. "Welcome, Miss Greenwald," Roderick said, his voice trembling as though speaking was an unfamiliar task. "I trust you will find everything to your liking. You're my only guest for the week." Anna smiled, her default response to most situations. "Thank you, Roderick. It looks lovely." She started to turn towards the apartment when Roderick added, "Just one rule. The small storage room at the end of the hall is private. Off limits. Please respect that." Anna nodded, "Of course, not a problem." Over the next few days, Anna explored the city, losing herself in its labyrinthine streets and sampling exotic foods. Every night, she returned to the apartment, write about her day, and then fall into a deep sleep. However, she began to notice peculiar things in the flat. The scent of decay was stronger in certain areas, and she'd occasionally hear faint noises at night. One evening, as she was brushing her teeth, she saw a shadow moving under the bathroom door. When she opened it, no one was there. Anna's innate sense of curiosity began to eat at her, especially about the locked storage room. What was in there that was so private? She decided to take a peek. Finding a set of old lock-picking tools she kept as souvenirs from a previous adventure, Anna cautiously approached the door. But just as she touched the handle, she heard a voice. "Lost something, Miss Greenwald." Anna jumped, dropping the tools. It was Roderick. His figure cast a long, sinister shadow in the dim hallway. "Just curiosity," Anna admitted, trying to sound more daring than she felt. Roderick tilted his head. "Didn't I mention it was off limits?" Anna nodded. "You did, and I'm sorry. I won't touch it again." She expected anger, but Roderick simply chuckled. "Oh, it's quite all right. Everyone gets curious. Just remember the rule." Anna thanked him and rushed to her room, heart pounding. She felt silly for trying to snoop, and even sillier for feeling afraid of her thin landlord. But the feeling of being watched never left her. Over the next few days, Anna felt a growing paranoia. She found her belongings moved or misplaced. Her diary, usually kept on the bedside table, was now in the living room. One evening, she found a small camera hidden in the bathroom ceiling. When she confronted Roderick via message, he played dumb, saying the previous tenant might have left it. Anna wasn't convinced. On her second to last night, Anna decided she needed answers. Armed with her tools, she tried the storage door again. This time, Roderick was not there to stop her. The door creaked open. The smell hit her first, that overwhelming stench of decay. Inside, the room was dimly lit by a single bulb. Along the walls were shelves lined with jars. In them floated what looked like human organs. A collection of eyes, fingers, and worse stared back at her. In the center of the room was a table with what looked like surgical instruments stained with dried blood. Horrified, Anna stumbled back, knocking over a jar. It shattered, and its contents spilled out with a sickening thud. As she tried to flee, she heard Roderick's voice behind her. "Ah, Miss Greenwald, it seems your curiosity has once again led you astray." Anna turned, finding herself face to face with Roderick. He held a gleaming knife. "I thought it might come to this. You seem too adventurous for your own good." Anna, panic mounting, thought quickly, She reached for a nearby jar and hurled it at Roderick. The jar smashed into his face, its contents blinding him temporarily. Using the brief window of opportunity, Anna sprinted from the room. Roderick chased after her, shouting obscenities. Anna ran, heart-pounding, toward the exit, but she found the front door locked from the outside. She was trapped. Suddenly, she remembered the fire escape she had seen from the living room window. Racing there, she smashed the window with a chair, climbed out, and began descending. Reaching the ground, Anna ran until she found a police station. The authorities, upon hearing her story, stormed Roderick's flat. Inside, they found evidence of multiple murders. The organs and jars belonged to past tenants, ones who had left seemingly glowing reviews on Airbnb. Those reviews were penned by Roderick himself. As for Roderick, he was nowhere to be found. Authorities suspected he fled, anticipating Anna's escape. Anna left the city shaken, vowing never to return, but one thing haunted her more than the grotesque collection she discovered. Upon retrieving her belongings from the flat, she noticed her diary was open. Inside, written in Roderick's shaky handwriting, was a message. Curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back. I will be seeing you soon, Miss Greenwald. Even now, miles away, Anna felt his eyes on her. The hunt was far from over. Mark's life had become painfully predictable. A tech guru with a sprawling house in Silicon Valley and a job that sent him across the globe, he still felt an emptiness that his success couldn't fill. Divorced for 2 years and disconnected from his teenage son, Mark needed an escape from his pristine, microchipped life. His therapist had recommended he take a break, get away from the screens and the relentless beep of notifications. On a whim, Mark booked a cozy little cottage in the woods, advertised on Airbnb. The photos showcased a rustic haven, wooden beams, a roaring fireplace, and large windows that opened to a dense, green canopy. It seemed like the perfect place to unplug. Mark arrived just as the evening fog began to roll in, the temperature a chilly embrace against his skin. The woods sang a chorus of nighttime creatures, their calls echoing through the tall trees. He admired the quaint charm of the cottage from outside. The online pictures had done it justice. The first evening was sheer bliss. Mark enjoyed a hearty meal, read a paperback, and allowed the weight of his stressful life to melt away. It was only as he prepared for bed that he noticed something odd, the faintest red light blinking beneath the television stand. Intrigued, he knelt down to inspect it. To his surprise, Mark discovered a hidden camera, its lens pointing directly at the couch where he had been lounging. Panic bubbled in his chest. He swiftly checked the rest of the living area. In the corners, cleverly disguised as innocuous objects, were more cameras. The realization struck him with a cold jolt. Someone had been watching. Shaken, Mark decided to use his tech savvy to find out just how deep the rabbit hole went. Scanning for network signals, he found a hidden Wi-Fi network emitting from somewhere within the property. He connected and was led to a series of live feeds, each showcasing different parts of the cottage. In one feed, Mark could see himself, a live broadcast from the bedroom camera. In another, he saw the bathroom, the shower still glistening from his use. The creepiness escalated when he stumbled upon feeds from previous guests, families with children, couples on romantic getaways, all recorded without their knowledge. Its initial panic evolved into sheer terror as he unearthed archive footage, some months old, some years. They were organized by guest names and dates. And worst of all, some files, labeled special, showcased guests in their most private moments, with zoom-ins, edits, and chillingly voyeuristic angles. By now, Mark was desperate to leave, but his car keys, which he distinctly remembered placing on the kitchen counter, were missing. Desperate, he decided to message the landlord through the Airbnb app, feigning ignorance about the cameras. "Hey there, I seem to have misplaced my car keys. I can't seem to find them. Would you have any idea?" The reply came almost instantaneously. "Why don't you check behind the television stand? Sometimes things get lost there." The message sent a wave of dread through Mark. The landlord knew. He knew about the camera Mark had found. In a burst of adrenaline-fueled energy, Mark began formulating a plan. First, he disabled the cameras in the main living areas, Then, using his technical expertise, he managed to reverse hack the Wi-Fi feed. Through it, he discovered that the live streams were being sent to another location nearby. Gathering his courage, he decided to venture outside. The woods had taken on a menacing aura. Every whisper of the wind sounded like a concealed whisper, every rustle like a stealthy footstep. Guided only by the signal strength on his device, Mark trudged deeper into the woods. After what felt like hours, he stumbled upon a concealed cabin, slightly smaller than the cottage he had rented. Peering through a window, he saw walls lined with screens broadcasting live feeds from various rentals, not just his cottage. A rotund man, presumably the landlord, sat engrossed, headphones on, scribbling notes as he watched. Steeling himself, Mark smashed the window with a rock. The landlord, caught off guard, stumbled backward, knocking over a shelf. Amidst the chaos, Mark saw photos, hundreds of them, of different guests, including a freshly printed one of himself. The two men locked eyes, the atmosphere thick with tension. Mark's survival instincts kicked in. "Why?" he demanded, struggling to keep his voice steady. The landlord sneered, "People pay big money for these special films. It's a thriving business." In the ensuing scuffle, Mark managed to pin down the landlord, using zip ties he always carried in his tech bag to bind him. Gasping for breath, he called the police, who arrived promptly and took the landlord into custody. The aftermath was a whirlwind. The news of the criminal landlord's voyeuristic enterprise made headlines. Mark was both lauded for his bravery and pitied for his victimhood. Lawsuits were filed, other victims came forward, and Airbnb faced severe scrutiny. But for Mark, the experience became a turning point. He sought therapy to process the trauma, reconnected with his estranged son, sharing his experience to ensure his safety in an increasingly digital age, and even started an NGO focused on digital privacy and safety. As time passed and the horror faded to memory, Mark often reflected on the twisted irony. The very technology he had sought to escape had ensnared him in its most sinister trap, but it had also been his salvation. Still, whenever he checked into a hotel or rental, the first thing he did was scan for hidden cameras, a haunting reminder of the night the woods washed back. Emily Hamilton had always been an introvert. Growing up as the youngest of 3 children in a rambunctious family, she had found solace in the world of books. Her words were her friends, her sentences were her comfort, and her stories were her escape. As she grew older, her passion for storytelling had naturally evolved into a career as a writer. The noise and demands of her bustling family life, however, often interrupted her creative flow. Her present life was stable, albeit unremarkable. Divorced with no children and only the echoes of her large family to keep her company, Emily decided to break away from her usual suburban environment. She needed a retreat, a place where she could truly let her creativity shine, free from distractions and interruptions. That was how Emily found herself in a charming townhouse in the city center, rented through Airbnb. It was quaint and old, with creaky wooden floors and high ceilings. The walls were decorated with old portraits of strangers from another era, eyes following her as she moved. The listing mentioned it was historically preserved, which explained the old-world charm and vintage furnishings. But for Emily, it was perfect. On her first day, Emily was in the living area, mapping out her novel structure when a thud came from the other side of the wall. It was faint but noticeable. The noise repeated again, louder. She tried to brush it off, thinking maybe she had a noisy neighbor. By evening, as she settled into bed, a series of unsettling noises began. There were scrapes, thumps, and what sounded like slurred, angry muttering. Emily tried to block out the sounds, imagining a drunk neighbor returning home. She wrapped herself tighter in the blanket, desperately trying to ignore the fear creeping into her mind. In the morning, she decided to introduce herself to the neighbor. It might be an opportunity to discuss the noise, she thought. But as she knocked on the door adjacent to hers, no one answered. She tried again later, but still, there was no response. The next night, the disturbances resumed. It sounded like someone pacing back and forth, accompanied by a low, rhythmic chanting. Emily's pulse quickened. She peeked through her window, trying to see if there was any movement in the house next door, but it was pitch dark. On the third day, curiosity and fear got the best of her. She decided to confront the source of her paranoia. Emily knocked firmly on the neighbor's door. When there was no answer, she slowly turned the doorknob, half expecting it to be locked, but to her surprise, it creaked open. The interior was chillingly cold. The air was thick with an old, musky smell. Dim light filtered through the dusty windows, revealing a living area much like her own, but in complete disarray. Empty liquor bottles littered the floor, and papers with indecipherable scribbles were strewn all around. A faint groan came from upstairs, followed by dragging footsteps. Emily hesitated for a moment, then decided to ascend the staircase, the wooden steps groaning in protest under her weight. She reached the top of the stairs, and the noises became clearer. The muttering was now a loud, desperate whimper. It was coming from behind a half-open door at the end of the hallway. Taking a deep breath, she pushed it open. Inside was a disheveled man, presumably the neighbor. His eyes were wild, darting back and forth, and he was repeatedly striking his own head, muttering words that Emily couldn't quite catch. Seeing him, Emily's heart raced. She had expected to confront a noisy drunk, but was met with a scene of genuine distress. "Hey," she began cautiously, "are you okay?" The man stopped abruptly, turning his attention to her. His gaze was vacant and haunted. "That won't stop," he whispered hoarsely. "The voices, they keep telling me things. Terrible things." Emily's fear shifted to concern. This man was clearly struggling with some form of mental health crisis. She tried to approach him, but he backed away, shaking his head vigorously. "No, you shouldn't be here," he warned, his voice shaky. "They'll start talking to you too." Panicking, Emily retreated, running downstairs and out of the townhouse, her mind racing. She needed to help this man, but she didn't know how. After contacting the local authorities, Emily learned the truth. The man was Arthur, the actual owner of both townhouses. His family had a history of schizophrenia, and it seemed Arthur had been living in isolation, battling his own demons without any support. She also learned the more shocking revelation. The townhouse she was staying in was not legally listed on Airbnb. Arthur, in his confused state, had put it up, and she was the unfortunate guest who had come to stay. Emily returned home, her retreat cut short. The echoes of Arthur's haunted eyes and desperate pleas stayed with her, making it impossible to remain in the townhouse. She wrote about her experience, creating a chilling narrative that shed light on the terrifying reality of mental illness. The story became her bestseller, but every time Emily read from it at an event or discussed it in an interview, she could still hear those eerie noises from next door, reminding her of the thin line that separates sanity from the abyss.